My name is Catherine Morgan. I'm 38 years old, a renewable energy engineer, wife, and mother. I live in Cedar Falls, Colorado, a town so peaceful that even the wind feels polite. From the outside, my life looks like it came straight from a lifestyle blog: solar panels on the roof, garden-grown kale, and a daughter who dreams of becoming an astronaut princess. But if you asked me what happened on September 18th last year, I'd tell you it's the day my little girl's innocence was ripped away by my own sister. She shaved my daughter's head, my 7-year-old daughter, Sophie, out of pure, calculated spite. But that's not where this story begins. See, to understand why someone would do something so vile, you have to understand the kind of rot that hides behind the mask of family. You have to go years back to when I started thinking I could rescue Lydia, back to when I believed in the kind of loyalty that only flows one way. Before I walk you through what I did after discovering Sophie's bare, trembling scalp, and trust me, it was surgical, legal, and deeply satisfying, let me take you back to when I still thought Lydia deserved a second chance. If you're watching this and you've ever felt used, underestimated, or like someone you love was twisted into a weapon against you, stick around. What happened next may sound cruel, but I promise you it was justice. And before we dive in, do me a small favor. If you've ever faced betrayal from someone you trusted with your whole heart, hit that subscribe button, leave a comment, just their first initial, and I'll know you get it. This isn't just a story about revenge. It's about standing up for the child in you that no one ever protected. Now, let's rewind. Growing up, Lydia and I were only 3 years apart, but we might as well have been raised on different planets. I was the achiever, the scholarship kid, the one who got quiet praise for straight A's and full-ride university acceptance letters. Lydia was the pretty one, the girl who won Miss Teen Pine County at 16, who dropped out at 17 when she got pregnant, and who could manipulate our mother with a single tear. I used to think our paths diverged because of choices, but now, I know better. Some people grow from pain, others rot in it. When Brent, her deadbeat ex-husband, walked out with his gym trainer girlfriend and their minivan, Lydia moved in with me and Erica temporarily. She brought her 2 daughters, Chloe and Nina. I told Erica it'd be for a few months. That was 3 years ago. I didn't realize until much later that temporarily was Lydia speak for until you break. And for a while, I let it happen. I funded everything: rent, utilities, therapy for Chloe's anger issues, orthodontics for Nina. When Lydia couldn't afford to buy groceries, I'd Venmo her $200 without hesitation. When she forgot to pick up the girls from daycare, I drove out early from work. When she claimed she couldn't find a job because of her bad back, I believed her. Erica warned me I was enabling her, but I brushed it off. She's family, I said. She's hurting. But here's the thing about people like Lydia. They know exactly how far they can push, how to keep themselves just pitiable enough to avoid accountability. And somewhere along the line, I stopped being her sister and started being her supply. And through it all, Sophie, my sweet, bright-eyed, empathy-overflowing daughter, remained unfailingly kind to her cousins, even when Chloe called her a tryhard for using words like observatory, even when Nina stole her favorite glitter markers and lied about it. Sophie just gave more. I'll never forget the night before the incident. Sophie was sitting at the kitchen table, legs swinging under the chair, carefully brushing out her long caramel brown hair. She was getting ready for her classmate Maya's birthday party. The theme was Royal Astronauts, and Sophie had picked out a silver dress with stars on it and a sparkly headband that made her feel like a princess on the moon. "Mom," she whispered, running a brush through her hair, "do you think Aunt Lydia could do my braid, the waterfall one she did for Chloe?" I hesitated. Erica, sitting across the table, raised an eyebrow without speaking. "Sure," I said slowly. "We'll ask her tomorrow." I remember Sophie beaming, gently placing the brush on the counter as if it were glass. I want to look extra nice. That's what haunts me. That innocence. That hope. The next day, I was called into an urgent site inspection at our solar plant. Erica was scheduled for back-to-back night shifts. We'd planned for Lydia to babysit the girls for 2 hours. Just 2 hours. When I dropped Sophie off, she was holding a small gift bag for Maya and humming Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. She kissed my cheek and said, "Tell the sun panels I said hi." It was the last time I saw her smile with both cheeks framed by hair. What happened during those 2 hours? What Lydia chose to do is something I'll never forgive. Not just the act itself, but the cold, casual cruelty of it. The calculated way she broke a child's spirit just to feel taller. When I returned home, the door was slightly ajar. That was the first thing. The second was silence. Sophie is many things, but quiet isn't one of them. I called her name. No answer. Then I heard a muffled sob from the bathroom. I walked in, and the air stopped. There she was, sitting on the edge of the tub, her hands cupped over her face, her long hair gone, shaved. Tufts of it clung to her pajama shirt, like feathers from a wounded bird. And standing behind her, arms crossed, was Lydia, holding a cordless buzzer in one hand, smirking. She was acting like such a diva, Lydia said, her voice bored. I thought this might humble her. I couldn't speak. My mouth opened, but no sound came. Just the rush of blood pounding in my ears, the taste of copper, the pressure behind my eyes. Sophie turned her face to me, cheeks blotchy, eyes red. I didn't want to, she whispered. She said I had to. She said I was selfish. That was the moment something inside me snapped. Not just as a mother, as a human being, as someone who, all her life, tried to keep the peace, who let things slide, who excused, rationalized, silenced herself to protect family. But there was no family in that bathroom, only a predator and her prey. I walked out, not because I was done, but because I was just getting started. What Lydia didn't know then, what she would come to understand in slow, irreversible devastation was that she hadn't just shaved Sophie's head. She'd cut the final thread holding together my restraint. And I was about to unravel her entire world, piece by piece. The night Sophie was violated, because that's what it was. A violation, I didn't sleep. Erica tried everything. Chamomile tea, a warm bath, whispered affirmations. But I couldn't stay still. I couldn't sit on that couch knowing Lydia was sleeping a few blocks away, blissfully unbothered, while my daughter lay trembling under our weighted blanket, rubbing her bald scalp like it was a question she didn't understand. I spent the night in Sophie's room, kneeling beside her bed, watching her chest rise and fall. Her dreams were broken, she twitched, whimpered, clutched my hand even in sleep. Around 4 a.m., she mumbled, "Do I still look like me?" I lied. "You look even more like you, sweetheart." But inside, I shattered, because the truth was, she didn't. Lydia hadn't just taken her hair. She'd taken a piece of her identity, and I knew, without a shred of doubt, that I would never let this go. The next morning, I started building the case. Not an emotional one, a legal one. Erica had worked long enough in the pediatric ward to know what to do. "First," she said, her voice tight, "we need to document everything." So we did. I took photos of Sophie's head from every angle, including the small razor burn behind her ear. I recorded Sophie's recounting of what Lydia said. "You're not special. Your mom buys you love. And the worst. Let's see how pretty you feel now." Erica helped me type a formal incident report. Then we called Sophie's therapist and scheduled an emergency session. The therapist, to her credit, didn't flinch. She'd seen too much in her line of work. But even she said, This is a clear-cut case of emotional abuse, the kind that leaves bruises you can't photograph. I filed a police report that same afternoon. The officer who took my statement, Detective Hall, was a father of 2 girls. He read the incident summary, scrolled through the photos, and nodded. "We're going to need a forensic interview," he said. "But this qualifies for mandatory CPS escalation." That same evening, I received a call from Child Protective Services. I gave them every detail I had, every screenshot, every payment receipt showing Lydia had been financially dependent on me for years. I didn't just want her punished, I wanted it on record that I had tried, supported, enabled, and that this was how she repaid me. But none of that compared to the most important piece of evidence, the security camera. A year ago, I'd installed a Nest Cam in the hallway between the living room and bathroom. For general safety, 3 kids running around. Accidents happen. That little piece of plastic had captured the moment Sophie tried to run. Lydia grabbing her by the arm, dragging her back into the bathroom. You could hear Sophie saying, "Please, no, please, I want to call my mom." You could hear Lydia saying, "Call her, then she'll thank me later." The video cut off right after the bathroom door slammed shut. That was enough. CPS assigned an agent. Mrs. Carter. She came to our home, met with Sophie, spoke to Erica and me separately. She was efficient, but you could see it on her face, disgust. "We've had reports on Miss Harris before," she said carefully. "Anonymous calls, but nothing ever stuck." I nodded. "It's going to stick this time." Meanwhile, Lydia was quiet. Too quiet. No apology, no text, no fake regret. Only a smug silence, like she was waiting for us to cool off. That's how I knew she had no remorse. She genuinely believed she was in the right, that what she did was tough love, that Sophie deserved it. The arrest came 4 days later. Lydia was at a gas station when they picked her up. The officer told me she looked confused at first. Then she saw the cuffs. Then she laughed. For what hair grows back? It made me physically ill. But what made me even sicker was what came after. The backlash. The very next day, my mother called. Now. I hadn't spoken to my mother in over a year. She'd always favored Lydia. "She needs you more." She used to say, "She didn't get the brains." Kathy. Let her have the love. This woman who hadn't visited Sophie since her 5th birthday called me to say I was cruel for involving the police. That family stays out of court. That Lydia was going through a lot. I hung up. No explanation, no justification, just click. Because I had finally learned people who enable monsters are monsters too. But the backlash didn't stop there. Brent, the ex-husband. The vanishing act reappeared like a roach under fluorescent light. Apparently, he was seeking full custody of Chloe and Nina. Now that Lydia had proven herself unfit, the irony was bitter. This man had abandoned his kids and now wanted to play hero. But at that moment, I didn't care. Those kids needed out. Even if it meant going with someone equally broken. CPS launched a concurrent investigation into Lydia's parenting. Chloe and Nina, after a temporary stay in foster care, were handed to Brent under strict supervision. I wasn't happy, but I wasn't fighting for them. Not anymore. Meanwhile, I pressed charges: emotional abuse, child endangerment, minor assault, and I wasn't stopping at criminal court. I was going civil, too. Financial damages, therapy costs, emotional trauma. Every dollar Lydia had taken from me over 3 years, $89 or $600 to be exact, I wanted it back. My attorney, Renee Lawson, loved the case. "This isn't just winnable," she said. "This is precedent-setting. People think psychological abuse doesn't leave scars. Let's prove them wrong." While the legal process unfolded, Sophie changed. She grew quieter. She stopped wearing her favorite colors. She began drawing girls with no faces, no hair. Her therapist called it temporary identity displacement. I called it grief. I took time off work. Erica did too, every day. We combed the internet for resources, wigs, children's books about hair loss. We wrote affirmations on her mirror. We built her back, strand by invisible strand. But one night, Sophie looked at me and asked, "Is Aunt Lydia going to hurt someone else's kid?" That's when I knew this wasn't just about revenge. This was protection. What I was doing was right, and I'd follow it through to the end. Then came the video leak. A few days before the arraignment, the footage from my Nest Cam was leaked anonymously online. It made its way onto local news, then viral parenting forums. The headline read, "Aunt shaves 7-year-old's head while she cries, calls it character building." Public outrage exploded. I got calls from journalists, from women who had lived through similar trauma, from strangers who thanked me for standing up. But not everyone was supportive. One anonymous message read, "You're destroying your own sister's life over hair. Blood is blood." I didn't reply. But I thought, if blood justifies abuse, then we're all doomed. The arraignment hearing was short. Lydia pleaded not guilty. She wore a navy blazer and looked bored. When the judge listed the charges, she smirked. Sophie wasn't there. She didn't need to see it, but I was. And when Lydia turned around and scanned the courtroom, she caught my eye. For a second, just 1 second, I thought I saw doubt. But doubt wasn't enough. Because I had plans, and I was just getting started. After Lydia's smug little smirk at the arraignment, I stopped hoping for remorse. Whatever sliver of humanity I thought might still exist in her had been suffocated long ago, maybe by bitterness, maybe by jealousy, or maybe just by the entitlement that festered when no one ever held her accountable. I wasn't there to fix Lydia anymore. I was there to dismantle everything she had left. And that started with the civil suit. My attorney, Renee, was razor-sharp mid-40s, unapologetically aggressive, and the kind of woman who wore bright red lipstick to court, as if daring the system to underestimate her. We sat across from each other in her office, surrounded by legal pads, financial statements, and printed screenshots. I slid a thick folder across the desk. "This is every Venmo payment I've made to Lydia in the last 3 years. Monthly transfers, utility bills in my name, even school fees for her kids." Renee flipped through it, eyebrows lifting. "This is gold," she murmured. "You're not just her sister. You were her financial lifeline, and she repaid you by emotionally abusing your daughter. We're not just filing for damages, we're filing for malicious intent." It turns out that when you document everything, and I mean everything, justice becomes less abstract. We weren't just demanding reimbursement for therapy costs and emotional trauma. We were building a timeline of neglect, manipulation, and deliberate harm. Every month of unpaid rent, every time I covered her groceries, every time she claimed she couldn't afford diapers, but somehow managed to get her nails done. The paper trail didn't lie. But that wasn't enough for me. I wanted the story told not just in court, but in a way that would follow her wherever she went. So I agreed to speak with a journalist from a parenting magazine who had reached out after the video leak. I was cautious, protective of Sophie's identity, but I told our story. Not just the bathroom scene, but everything before it. The slow erosion of boundaries, the subtle cruelties, the manipulation disguised as sisterhood. The article went viral within hours. Thousands of comments, most in support, some in disbelief. But what mattered was the message: this kind of abuse, psychological, emotional, was real. And it mattered. As public attention grew, so did Lydia's desperation. She started showing up at places I hadn't expected. Not at our house, we had a restraining order by then, but at my job site, yelling across a construction fence about how I was ruining her life. Once, she screamed, "You're the reason I have nothing." And I almost laughed, because she was right, but not in the way she meant. She had nothing because she had burned every bridge with gasoline made from lies and arrogance. I had just refused to hand her another match. That week, I filed an additional complaint: harassment, public disruption, violation of a protection order. The judge tightened restrictions, and Lydia, now facing mounting legal fees, did what she always did. She begged our mother for help. And, of course, our mother came running. She called me again, this time with a tone soaked in guilt and trembling pity. She's going through so much. Kat. She's lost the girls. She's scared. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I simply asked. And where was this sympathy when Sophie was sobbing in my arms, hairless and terrified? There was silence, then a sigh, then the words that told me everything. She didn't mean to hurt her that badly. That badly. As if there were an acceptable level of pain Lydia was allowed to inflict. As if the metric for forgiveness should be measured in bruises you can count or scars you can photograph. That call was the final nail in whatever fragile coffin still held my relationship with our mother. Meanwhile, Erica, who had been holding everything together behind the scenes, suggested something radical. Let's take Sophie away for a few days, she said one night as we folded laundry. Somewhere quiet, where this whole nightmare doesn't exist. I hesitated. What about court prep? She smiled. We'll bring the laptop, but we need to breathe. So we packed up and drove to a cabin 3 hours into the Rockies. It was small, simple, just trees, snow, and silence. Sophie spent hours outside in her knitted beanie, building snow aliens and making up stories about interstellar queens who lost their crowns but discovered they were powerful all along. That week, she laughed more. She slept without waking up in tears. And one night, as we sat by the fireplace, she said, "Mom, maybe I'm like the queens. Maybe this happened to show me I'm strong." I turned away to hide the tears. Because I hadn't just been fighting for revenge, I had been clinging to the hope that this child, this perfect, resilient soul, wouldn't internalize Lydia's cruelty as truth. And in that moment, I knew we were winning. We returned recharged, ready. The court date arrived. Criminal charges first. Lydia's defense attorney tried to spin it. It was a joke. He said, a misguided attempt to discipline a spoiled child. But the prosecution wasn't having it. They played the Nest Cam video. They brought in Sophie's therapist. They showed Lydia's financial records contrasted with screenshots of spa appointments and designer handbags. They painted a picture of not just cruelty, but calculated humiliation. And when the judge turned to Lydia and asked, "Do you feel remorse?" she paused, then said, "I feel misunderstood." The courtroom gasped. The verdict was swift. Guilty, 8 months of jail time, 3 years of probation, mandatory parenting and anger management classes. The civil case would follow a month later. But Lydia's life was already unraveling. Brent's custody bid succeeded. CPS ruled that Lydia posed ongoing emotional risk to minors. Her parental rights were suspended pending psychological evaluation. Her landlord, weary of media attention, issued a non-renewal notice. She was jobless, homeless, alone. And still, no apology. At one point, I considered what that might mean. Was she incapable or simply unwilling? Did she still believe she was right? Or had the lie become her identity? I didn't know. I stopped trying to understand her. Instead, I focused on Sophie. We built a new routine: school, therapy, creative writing classes. Erica and I adjusted our work hours to ensure one of us was always home. Sophie began wearing scarves as fashion statements. She drew comic strips of Captain Comet, a bald space explorer who used empathy as her superpower. We framed one and hung it above her bed. Still, a question lingered in the background, faint but persistent. What if Lydia came back? And I didn't know it then. But that question would soon become more than hypothetical. Because just when we thought the storm had passed, a phone call shattered our new peace. It wasn't Lydia. It was my mother. Her voice was hoarse, broken, and for once, there was no accusation in her tone. "Catherine," she said, "Lydia's in the hospital." The next word stopped my breath. "She has cancer, stage 3, and she's asking for you." I didn't answer her right away. My mother's voice on the other end of the line was trembling, soft in a way that made me feel like I was holding something fragile. "She's in the oncology wing at St. Mary's," she said. "The doctors found it during a scan. Cervical cancer. It's already spread to her lymph nodes. They've started aggressive chemo, but it's not looking good." I was silent, not out of shock, not even out of sadness, but because the anger I thought I'd burned out months ago started to glow again, hot in the pit of my stomach. It wasn't rage. It was something deeper, something complicated. It was the confusion that comes when the person who caused so much pain is now the one lying in a hospital bed, broken and bald, asking for the sister she once tried to destroy. "She's asking for me," I finally said. "After everything." "Yes," my mother said, "and for Sophie too." That made my chest tighten. "She doesn't get to see Sophie," I said, firmly. "She gave up that right the day she turned her into a punching bag for her own self-hatred." "I understand," my mother whispered, and for once, she didn't argue, but I think she knows that too. The call ended, but the weight of it stayed. I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling fan spinning endlessly above me. I kept thinking about the last time I saw Lydia in person smirking in court, arms crossed, dismissive. And now, she was hairless, weak, vulnerable, and reaching out, not with entitlement this time, but with what sounded dangerously like regret. Erica didn't say anything when I told her. She just nodded and held my hand. But later that evening, as we stood by the sink washing dishes, she said something that stuck. "You don't have to forgive her to face her. Closure doesn't always mean reconciliation." The next day, I visited Lydia. St. Mary's smelled like bleach and resignation. The oncology wing was quiet, dimly lit, filled with the soft beeping of machines and the hushed shuffles of nurses who'd seen too much. Lydia's room was at the end of the hall. I stood outside her door for a full minute before walking in. She looked small. Her skin was pale, her eyes sunken. The hospital gown hung loosely from her shoulders. She wasn't wearing her wig, and her scalp was mottled, a pale reminder of what she'd once inflicted on my daughter. But she wasn't smirking this time. She wasn't posturing or defensive. She was just tired. "Cat," she breathed, trying to sit up. "You came." I nodded, my arms crossed tight against my chest. "Don't read into it." She gave a faint smile. "Wouldn't dream of it." There was a long pause. I wasn't sure what I expected. Maybe tears, maybe a breakdown. But what I got was far more disarming. "I've been thinking," she said softly, "about what I did. To Sophie, to you. I don't have an excuse. There isn't one. I was jealous, ugly jealous, of how much she loved you, of how happy you both were. I wanted to hurt you, and I thought if I could tear her down, even just a little, it would make me feel better." She looked away, blinking hard. It didn't. It made me feel like the monster I probably am. I stayed silent. I didn't want to hand her forgiveness like a clean glass of water. I wanted her to sit in the mess she'd made, to taste it, to know what she'd taken. "I'm not asking you to forgive me," she continued. "I know I don't deserve that, but I do have one favor to ask." I tensed. What kind of favor? She hesitated, swallowing thickly. The chemo. I'm going to lose more hair. All of it. Eyebrows, lashes. I've looked into wigs, but they're expensive, and none of them feel right. But then I remembered Sophie, her hair. It was beautiful. I froze.
Are you seriously?
No, she said quickly, coughing as she sat up straighter. No, I'm not asking for it. I'm just saying. I wish I had told her how beautiful it was, how much I envied it. Not to take it away, just to appreciate it. There was another silence, this one longer, and then she said something I didn't expect. I don't want to die with everyone hating me. I already lost the girls. Brent won't even answer my calls. Mom's only here out of guilt. But you were the only person who ever showed up, even when I didn't deserve it, especially then. That sentence cracked something in me. Not enough to forgive her, not even close, but enough to sit down in the chair beside her bed. We talked for an hour. I didn't sugarcoat anything. I reminded her of every moment she manipulated, every lie she told, every time she twisted my love into a leash. She didn't deny it. She just nodded, took it, accepted it. When I left, I didn't promise to come back, but something shifted in me. Not for her, for Sophie. That night, I told Sophie about Lydia's condition. Carefully, honestly. I didn't hide the ugliness of the past, but I did explain the present. She's very sick, I said. She doesn't have much time, and she asked to see you, but only if you want to. Sophie thought for a long moment. Then she said, "Does she still hate me?" I knelt beside her. I don't think she ever really hated you, baby. I think she hated herself, and she took it out on you. That's not okay. But it's also kind of sad. Sophie nodded. Can I do something for her? Something small. What do you mean? She got up, went to her room, and came back with a bundle of tied hair, the locks we'd trimmed recently, the parts she'd asked me to keep for a future wig-making charity. Can we make this into a wig for her? Tears filled my eyes. You'd be okay with that. She shrugged. I know what it feels like, to lose your hair and feel like a different person. Maybe it'll help her feel like herself again, even just a little. So we did. We worked with a local artisan who specialized in custom wigs for chemo patients. We matched the color, the texture, even the softness. When it was done, Sophie decorated the box with stickers and wrote a small note. For Aunt Lydia, from Sophie, so you can feel strong like I did. When I delivered it to the hospital, Lydia broke down completely. No words, just sobs. The nurses had to give her extra tissues and water. She held the wig like it was made of gold. Tell her, she whispered. Tell her I was wrong, and she's the bravest person I've ever known. For a moment, I almost believed we'd come full circle. But the past still lived inside us. Not forgotten, not erased, just acknowledged. Lydia died 6 weeks later. I didn't go to the funeral, neither did Sophie, but I did send a single sunflower, Sophie's favorite, to be placed on her casket. Not for closure, not for peace, but for acknowledgement that even monsters, sometimes, are just broken people who never figured out how to heal. And maybe, just maybe, my daughter's compassion gave Lydia something she never gave anyone else. A final chance to be human. After Lydia's death, there was no big reckoning, no cinematic moment where the clouds parted and everything suddenly made sense. There was just silence. A strange, heavy silence that wrapped around our house like morning fog, soft, but impossible to ignore. Erica and I didn't talk about it much. And Sophie didn't ask. For her, I think. The story had ended long before the last chapter was written. In her heart, the version of Aunt Lydia who once mattered had already disappeared the day her hair hit the bathroom floor. Still, Grief has a way of finding you, even when you think you've outsmarted it. A few days after the funeral, I found Sophie sitting by the window, sketching quietly in her notebook. She wasn't drawing her usual space queens or rainbow bridges. This time, it was a hospital bed, a woman with no hair, and beside her, a little girl holding a wig box with a heart drawn on it.
Is that you? I asked gently.
She nodded. I wanted to draw the moment she smiled, because I think it was real.
I swallowed hard. It was...
She closed her notebook, not saying anything more, and I realized then that Sophie didn't need vengeance to heal. She needed to feel like she made a difference, that, despite the pain, she had found a way to bring light into a place full of shadows. That was her way of reclaiming power. Not through punishment, but through compassion. And honestly, it humbled me.
The months that followed were quieter. Life returned to its rhythms. Sophie started 3rd grade. She joined a science club and presented her first group project on women astronauts. Erica and I celebrated our 10th anniversary with a quiet dinner in the backyard. There was laughter again. Not forced, not artificial, just real.
But I'd be lying if I said the past didn't linger. Sometimes I'd wake up in the middle of the night with the ghost of Lydia's voice echoing in my ears, or catch myself wondering if there was something I could have done differently, earlier, to stop the avalanche before it crushed us all. But regret is a trap one I refuse to live in. I didn't start this war. I just refused to lose it. Therapy helped, not just for Sophie, but for me too. I sat in that chair week after week, peeling back layers of resentment, guilt, and exhaustion. I confessed things I was ashamed of, that a part of me had relished watching Lydia fall, that I'd replayed her sentencing in my head like a favorite scene. But my therapist, a calm woman named Dr. Lamb, never judged. She just asked, "What does justice mean to you now?" And that question lingered with me long after the session ended. Because justice, I realized, isn't about balance. It's not about making sure everyone gets what they deserve. It's about protection, boundaries, truth. And in that sense, I had done what I needed to do, not just for Sophie, for myself. For every moment I stayed silent when Lydia mocked me growing up. For every time I covered her lies, paid her bills, made excuses. I didn't just protect my daughter. I protected the younger version of me, the one who kept hoping Lydia would love her back.
One day, about 6 months after Lydia's death, I got a call from Mrs. Carter, the CPS agent who'd first handled our case. She wanted to thank me, apparently. Our case had been used in a new training module for identifying emotional abuse. "Your documentation," she said, "has helped us teach younger agents what to look for when the scars aren't visible."
That phone call did something to me. It reminded me that even pain, when shared responsibly, can become protection for others. That my story, our story, wasn't just about suffering. It was a warning and a roadmap. Erica, ever the quiet anchor of our family, suggested I write about it, not for publication, just for us, for Sophie to read one day, when she was older. I hesitated at first, but eventually. I opened a blank document and titled it, "The Year Everything Changed." I wrote the whole thing raw, unfiltered, messy, the betrayal, the fear, the rage, the courtroom, the wig, the forgiveness that never came, and the healing that did. And when I finished, I printed it, sealed it in an envelope, and wrote on the front, "For when you're ready to know how strong you really are." It's still in my nightstand drawer, because that's what this journey taught me, that sometimes strength isn't loud. It doesn't scream or demand vengeance. Sometimes it looks like a child giving her abuser the one thing they don't deserve, a final act of kindness that costs her nothing but offers them a sliver of peace. Sometimes strength is simply surviving with your heart intact. So no, I never forgave Lydia, and I don't think I ever will. But I made peace with what happened. I chose to stop letting her live rent-free in my mind. I chose Sophie. I chose healing. And that choice, every single day, has made all the difference. To anyone out there listening, maybe you've been betrayed by someone you trusted. Maybe you're carrying anger so heavy it's started to feel like part of your skin. Maybe you're wondering if justice will ever come. Let me tell you this. It doesn't always look like prison bars or courtroom wins. Sometimes, justice is a little girl smiling again. Sometimes, it's reclaiming your peace in the quiet aftermath. Sometimes, it's just saying no more. And that's enough. If you made it this far, thank you. This wasn't just a story. It was a scar turned into something useful. And if it resonated with you, if you've ever felt like your pain was invisible, like your trauma didn't count, because it wasn't bruises or broken bones, please leave a comment. You're not alone. Hit like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who might need it. Let's keep telling these stories, not to relive the pain, but to make sure it has somewhere to go. Until next time, protect your peace and never mistake silence for healing. Because real healing,
it makes noise. Hi.
Story 2. My name is Charlotte West. I'm 29 years old, and last month, my fiancé vanished from our life with a text message. I didn't scream, I didn't beg, I didn't even cry that day. I just opened the front door, stared into the quiet Texas heat, and knew this wasn't going to end with silence. Because when someone asks for space, and then uses that space to rekindle a romance behind your back, what they're really asking for is permission to betray you without guilt. And I wasn't about to give him that. But before I take you into how I stripped Ryan Carter of his comfort, his status, his reputation, and yes, even his car, let's rewind. Because people like him don't just wake up one day and decide to betray. They groom you for it. They train you to expect less. And they count on you staying quiet when they finally show their true face. So if you've ever been told you're too much, too intense, too emotional, or worse, not enough to be someone's forever, this story is for you. Stick around, because what starts with heartbreak ends in poetic justice. And while you're here, go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe, and comment if you've ever been blindsided by someone you thought was your person. This isn't just a story, it's a survival guide in disguise. I live in Austin, Texas. I'm a custom motorcycle builder. Grew up in a garage with more oil-stained rags than Barbies. My mom, Janet, raised me solo after my dad walked out when I was 10. She taught me 2 things: how to change a carburetor, and how to never settle for someone who wants to fix you. She also told me, the moment you have to ask someone to choose you, they already haven't. I used to laugh at that, until I met Ryan Carter. He was the opposite of my world-tailored suits, luxury watches, startup buzzwords, and an Instagram feed full of smiles that never quite reached his eyes. He came into my garage with a 2019 Triumph Bonneville and a story about how he loved the vintage aesthetic but hated the maintenance. I should have known then. A man who wants the classic look without the classic commitment. But he was charming, smart. He listened. And when he asked me out for drinks after 3 appointments in a row, I said yes. The first year was good. We talked late into the night. He made me playlists, told me I was different, that I made him feel grounded, safe. He said his ex, Jordan, was passionate but unstable. That with me, he could see forever. He even said I reminded him of the version of himself he wanted to become. Sounds poetic, doesn't it? But people don't build you up like that unless they're planning to use you as scaffolding. I started noticing the cracks after month 16. We were engaged by then. He proposed during a New Year's Eve trip to Colorado Snow. Candles, the whole production. But when we got back to real life, he started retreating, not in big ways, subtle ones. He'd forget plans, show up late, say he was overwhelmed with work at his startup. I believed him, even made excuses for him to my friends. But then came the silence, the deep, aching silence of a man who's already somewhere else emotionally, but hasn't had the guts to physically leave yet. Until one Tuesday afternoon, mid-chop of vegetables for a gumbo recipe I learned from my grandmother. My phone buzzed. One text, 4 sentences.
Charlie, I'm sorry. Things are messy. I need space to think. Please don't call. I'll reach out when I can.
No call, no conversation, just evaporated, like love was a lease, and he decided not to renew.
I stood there, knife midair, onion juice stinging my fingers, and I remember the overwhelming stillness, not the kind that's peaceful, the kind that feels like you've just been hit by a silent bomb. My heartbeat was in my ears. My lungs forgot how to work. I responded with just one word.
Okay. And that was the last thing I ever said to him, until I took everything back. For 3 days. I didn't hear from him. No explanation, no apology. Just radio silence. My mind did what minds do, it filled in the blanks. Maybe he was having a breakdown. Maybe there was a family emergency. Maybe he needed help. But on the 4th day, the universe intervened in the form of a DM. Devin Hale, a guy I barely knew, who worked at the same startup as Ryan. He messaged me on Instagram. Hey, I don't know if I'm crossing a line, but I think you should see this. Attached was a screenshot from Ryan's close friend's story, a picture of him in Maui, drink in hand, arm around someone I instantly recognized. Jordan. The ex? The woman he swore was toxic. The woman he said made him feel like he was never enough. The woman he said he had closed the door on permanently. Now they were opening coconuts together. The caption on the post. Sometimes, to move forward, you have to revisit the past. I stared at it, fingers numb. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I just sat down, very slowly, on the kitchen floor. Max, my 3-year-old Alaskan Malamute, came over and rested his head on my lap, as if he could feel the shattering inside me. And that's when the realization clicked. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't confusion. This was calculated. He had planned the whole thing. He said he needed space because he needed plausible deniability. So when people asked why we split, he could say, we just needed time apart. Not, I abandoned her to hook up with my ex while we were planning a wedding. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at my workbench, staring at the half-finished Harley tank I had been painting for a client. And I started writing. Not poetry, not a letter, a list. A list of everything I had done for Ryan. Co-signed the car he drives. Paid half the deposit on the apartment. Hosted his out-of-town investors. Covered his half of rent during cash flow issues. Introduced him to my business network. Helped him design the pitch deck that won his Series A funding. He didn't just betray me emotionally. He used me as infrastructure. And it was time to remove the scaffolding. But before I made a move, I found something that burned deeper than the betrayal. Something in our drawer, something handwritten, a notebook. And on the first page, in his tight, lean cursive, was this entry. Jordan is wildfire. Charlie is a cabin. One sets me on fire. The other keeps me safe. Do I want comfort or chaos? That was the moment something in me cracked. Not broken, no. Broken implies weakness. This was sharper, colder. I didn't want to burn. I didn't want to shelter him. I wanted to rebuild. Without him. Without his narrative. And the first step, making sure he no longer had anything that belonged to me, including the illusion that he could come back whenever it suited him. Because I knew he would. And I was going to be ready. The morning after reading that journal entry, I woke up with a stiffness in my chest that wasn't sadness anymore. It was clarity. There's something surgical about betrayal. The first cut shocks you, but then numbness sets in. And once it does, you stop bleeding and start calculating.
So I did what any girl with an abandoned engagement ring. A legal advantage. And a silent house does at 7 a.m. on a Thursday. I called Monica.
Monica James was my best friend since high school, and currently an associate partner at one of Austin's top civil litigation firms, sharp, deliberate, and allergic to male nonsense. She once wrote a prenup for her own 3-month relationship just for fun. She picked up on the second ring.
"Charlie," she said. "No greeting needed. Tell me how deep the damage is."
I didn't cry. I didn't say anything dramatic. I just sent her the screenshots, the flight booking, and a copy of the journal page. She whistled through her teeth. Well, damn, he really said the quiet parts out loud. By 10 a.m., I was in her office with a coffee in one hand and a copy of the apartment lease in the other.
"Okay," Monica began, drawing lines on a whiteboard. "This isn't just emotional, it's strategic. First, do you want to go scorched earth, surgical, or poetic?"
I blinked. I didn't realize there were categories. There are always categories, she said, already writing down bullet points. Scorched earth means lawsuits, public exposure, full-on character annihilation. Surgical means clean cuts remove him from your life, financially and legally. Poetic. That's where we humiliate him just enough that he understands, but doesn't know when it's coming. I considered that, and then I said, "Give me poetic, but with receipts." She grinned like a war strategist just given permission to unleash. "Oh, honey, he's not ready." Over the next 72 hours, we built a case not for court, but for closure. Step 1 was itemizing everything with Ryan's name attached to mine. His car registered in my name. I bought it after his credit score tanked from a failed crypto investment he refused to admit happened. He made 2 payments, then forgot the rest. I had the bank statements. Next, our apartment. We moved in a year ago, but the lease was in my name. He claimed it was just temporary until his startup stabilized and he could take over the finances. That day never came. But I paid every electric bill, every repair fee, every security deposit, and because I had kept receipts like a seasoned ex of a financial deadbeat, Monica had all the ammo she needed. Even the engagement ring. Ryan had told people he spent a fortune on it, some 2.5-carat heirloom from his great-aunt. In reality, I split the cost with him because he said he wanted to propose sooner than expected, but didn't want to wait for his bonus. I wired him $3,200. Monica laughed. That ring is a glorified IOU. Then came the asset list. Over the 2 years together, I had paid for a MacBook Pro, half his business coaching sessions, marketing materials for his startup, his half of the co-working space for 3 months, plane tickets to networking events he never attended. Total value, just under $18,000. Now, to be clear, I wasn't planning on suing him. Not really. But Monica had a plan. We weren't going to go through the legal system. We were going to go through social currency. Austin is a startup town. People survive on reputations, referrals, and cocktail hour whispers. And Ryan. He was about to launch his second round of funding. What do you think happens when the woman who helped you draft your pitch deck also happens to know how many VCs you ghosted? We weren't going nuclear, but we were pulling the oxygen out of his launch pad. I also changed the locks on the apartment. That part was non-negotiable. The day I did it, I felt something shift in the air like the house had been holding its breath and finally exhaled. Ryan hadn't come home. Not yet. But I knew he would. They always do. Especially when the illusion of their fallback plan vanishes. To prepare, I packed his things. Every hoodie, every sock, every overpriced skincare product he never used. I boxed them meticulously, labeling each box with a list of contents, cross-referenced with receipts if I had them. Then I stored it all in the apartment's public storage room with a camera set up. If he claimed something went missing, I'd have footage. Monica was impressed. You're running this breakup like a corporation.
I learned from the best, I replied, thinking of Ryan's endless TED Talk monologues about strategic pivots and emotional bandwidth.
I also canceled the wedding. It wasn't just a matter of refunds. I contacted each vendor personally, explained the situation without drama, and made sure all future communication was redirected to me alone. And then I did something small, something that hurt more than I expected. I removed our shared calendar. I deleted our Spotify playlists. I wiped the digital reminders of a life I thought we were building.
Not because I was angry, but because I was clearing space not for him, for me.
10 days after the text message, just as Monica predicted, Ryan returned. It was a Sunday evening. Golden hour light bathed the apartment hallway. I had just gotten out of the shower when I heard the knock. Max barked once, low and alert. I wrapped myself in a towel, peeked through the peephole, and there he was. Same haircut, same smug smirk, slightly tanner, a suitcase beside him. I didn't open the door right away. I made him knock again, louder this time. Finally, I opened just a crack. His expression flickered between relief and confusion. Hey, what's with the lock? My key's not working. I leaned against the doorframe. Yeah, I changed them. Kind of goes with changing my expectations.
He blinked. Wait. What, babe? I just needed some time to decompress. Things were crazy with work. And Jordan?
I cut him off. Don't say her name. Not here. He stepped back slightly, then tried a smile. Come on, Charlie. You can't be mad forever. I opened the door just wide enough to toss a manila envelope at his feet. Inside the receipts, the documents, the journal page highlighted. His smile died. What is this? It's everything you left behind, I said, emotionally, legally, financially. He picked up the envelope, opened it, scanned a few pages. You kept track of this, like you kept track of my heart. He stared at me then, as if seeing me for the first time. Not the woman who made him feel safe, but the one who just pulled the rug out from under his fantasy. You didn't have to do this, he muttered. I tilted my head, but you did have to leave, and now you're free, just like you wanted. I closed the door, gently, no slam, no scream, just finality. Behind it, Max laid his head on my foot. Monica texted right on cue. He show up, yep. Did he cry? Not yet, but give it a week. Because the thing about poetic justice, it unfolds in chapters. And the next chapter wasn't going to be written in private. The thing about people like Ryan is that they rarely expect consequences. They float through life cushioned by charm, timing, and just enough ambiguity to avoid ever getting pinned down. But startups, like relationships, are built on trust. And when trust cracks, the entire foundation starts to rot from the inside. Ryan returned to his apartment that Sunday with an envelope full of documented truth and a door forever closed behind him. I assumed, hoped, even that he'd just disappear, lick his wounds, tell his friends some self-pitying version of the story, and vanish into the tech world where empty jargon could hide his hollow spine. But no. 4 days later, his LinkedIn status update popped up in my feed, like a roach crawling back from a squashed body. Excited to announce that Carter X Labs has officially entered Series B funding, grateful to our early believers, and especially to Jordan, who has always been a source of creative fire. Sometimes, to grow, we must let go of comfort and step into risk. #entrepreneur, life, #grind never stops. He posted a picture him and Jordan, side by side, hand on heart, in front of some co-working space with fake plants and overpriced coffee. He had turned the betrayal into a brand campaign. And I knew then This wasn't about getting closure anymore. It was about ensuring the record reflected reality. Monica, of course, had anticipated this. When we were drafting the file, the comprehensive folder of all financial support, collaboration, and material contribution I had made to his startup, she'd said something that stayed with me.
There's power in silence, Charlie, but there's leverage in documentation.
We hadn't sent it to anyone, not yet, but now we had motive, timing, and cause, not for revenge, for reputation recalibration.
You see, Ryan had always told people his startup was a solo genius endeavor. The truth, half the pitch materials were created at my kitchen table by me. His first MVP minimum viable product, I designed the UI mock-up on Figma. His presentation deck for investor meetings, I coached him through it using tips I'd learned pitching my own garage to lenders when I was 22. And while I never asked for credit because love shouldn't be transactional, I didn't expect to be erased. Or worse, replaced by the very person he once warned me was his worst impulse. So Monica and I met over coffee and laid out a plan. Step 1, we'd gather testimonies not for court, but for credibility. We started by calling Devin, the coworker who'd originally tipped me off. He didn't need convincing. He told us that Ryan had been talking about leaving Charlie for weeks before the text ever came through. He said he was biding his time. Devin admitted, said Jordan was fire, and he missed burning. It was the second time I'd heard that phrase. A man so obsessed with metaphors. He didn't realize he'd become one burning everything he touched. Next, we reached out to Priya, one of Ryan's earliest freelance developers. She'd quit 6 months ago. Why? Because Ryan refused to pay her on time and claimed investor funds were pending. Monica cross-referenced this with bank records Ryan had accidentally CC'd to me once. He was never low on funds. He was just low on integrity. Then came the final nail screenshots. Monica had pulled archived backups from my iCloud old email threads, shared documents, Notion pages, even calendar invites where I was listed as creative consultant for early planning sessions. It wasn't legal proof of ownership, but it was undeniable evidence of involvement. And in the startup world, perception is king. With a folder now as thick as his ego, we drafted a curated packet, a truth bomb wrapped in professionalism. Then we compiled a list of targets. 3 journalists who regularly covered Austin's startup scene. 2 seed investors I'd met during early pitch parties. A VC analyst at a major firm Ryan had name-dropped during brunch like a badge of honor. The co-working space manager, who had blacklisted Ryan once for not paying meeting room overages. And we sent them a single, polished email, no rants, no emotional pleas, just facts. As you consider the rising profile of Carter X Labs, we feel it's important you have a complete understanding of the collaborative inputs that shaped its early stages. Please find attached documentation outlining substantial unpaid contributions, ethical inconsistencies, and collaborative exploitation from multiple individuals who believed they were helping build something genuine. The packet included quotes from Devin and Priya, annotated screenshots, calendar references, and a copy of the journal page Ryan had left in our drawer. Then we waited. It took 3 days. On the 4th, a journalist from Tech Trenches Weekly published a piece, Carter X Hustle, Hype, or House of Cards. The article didn't accuse, it questioned, which is worse, sometimes, in the world of venture capital. It outlined Ryan's lack of transparency with early collaborators, included anonymized quotes, and most damning ended with this sentence. In the age of founders who build on borrowed backs, it's time we ask who's really behind the pitch decks we fund. By noon that day, Ryan's LinkedIn post had been quietly deleted. He called me that evening. I didn't answer. He called again, left a voicemail. Charlie, I don't know what you've been telling people, but this is getting out of hand. Investors are pulling back. I didn't mean to hurt you. We just drifted. Please, let's talk. No apology, no ownership, just panic that the scaffolding was gone.
and the facade was collapsing. That voicemail didn't hurt. It felt hollow, like wind rushing through a skeleton of what used to be a relationship. Max barked at the sound of it. I took that as a sign. But then something I didn't expect happened. Jordan reached out. A message request on Instagram. One sentence. "You deserve better than what he did to you." I didn't know the full story. I'm sorry. I stared at that message for a full minute. I didn't respond. Because the truth is, I didn't hate her. I pitied her. She thought she won. But what she had won was a man who builds himself from borrowed parts and never pays the mechanic. The startup world talks about disruption, about agility, about adaptation, but they rarely talk about consequence, about how relationships, when entangled with business, don't just end, they unravel thread by thread until what's left is a knot of debt, memory, and sharp edges. And I had just handed Ryan the scissors. But the story wasn't over, because while Ryan's house of cards began to collapse, something else was rising. Me. And soon. So would the garage he once said was cute for now. There's a moment right after a storm rips through where everything feels eerily still. The air, for the first time in days, doesn't taste like electricity or smoke. It just exists. That's what the week after Ryan's implosion felt like. He wasn't just gone. His name disappeared from group chats. His face was scrubbed off partner pages. And his once busy social media turned into digital tumbleweeds. The startup community, just like any other crowd, doesn't applaud downfall, but they don't stand near collapsing buildings either. For the first time in years, I woke up with silence that felt safe. And now, I wasn't rebuilding my life from the ruins of someone else's mistakes. I was crafting it from the steel bones of my own. My garage had always been there, quiet, loyal, and waiting for me to return fully. I'd been managing it out of necessity, treating it like a fallback plan while pretending my future lay in some shared penthouse or behind a fancy co-founder title Ryan once dangled like a carrot. But that Monday morning, with a cup of strong coffee in hand and my shop boots tied tight, I stepped through the side door with purpose. My Team 5 mechanics, who'd stayed loyal through months of personal chaos, were already hard at work. As I walked past the line of custom Harleys, Ducatis, and Triumphs waiting for new life, Reed, my lead technician, looked up. "You're early," he said, a little surprised.
I smiled. I'm home.
He nodded like he'd been waiting to hear those words. And that moment, it didn't need music or applause. It was just real. That same week, something unexpected landed in my inbox. An email from an investor I'd once met at a startup networking mixer Ryan dragged me to. 2 years ago. Her name was Marina Silva, a sharp, no-nonsense woman with a talent for reading through male ego like glass. Back then, she'd asked me more questions than Ryan during his pitch, which irritated him to no end. Now her message read, "Hi Charlotte, I came across the Tech Trenches article and couldn't help remembering how sharp you were during that Q&A. If you're ever considering scaling your garage or expanding services, I'd love to talk. Real innovation comes from people who build with their hands and their hearts." I read the email 3 times, not because I doubted it, but because it was the first time since Ryan that someone saw my value without me having to justify it. I forwarded the email to Monica with the subject line, "Poetic Justice has a LinkedIn profile." With Marina's quiet backing and some of my own capital, including what I'd gotten from selling the engagement ring, we launched a small expansion. Not flashy, not corporate, just real. A new bay, a hydraulic lift, a diagnostic system I'd dreamt of for years, and a mural on the back wall that read, "Built, not borrowed." Customers noticed. Business surged. My name not Ryan's, not his startup, became the one whispered in motorcycle circles as someone who could take old machines and breathe soul back into them. But more than the equipment, more than the growth, it was the space I reclaimed that mattered. No more walking on eggshells. No more swallowing myself to make room for someone else's fire. Then came Sarah. She rolled up one afternoon on a beat-up Triumph with a bad clutch and a confidence I hadn't seen in a while, not just in her, but in me. She wore worn leather, grease on her fingers, and a grin that said she knew exactly what she wanted. Max ran to her instantly, tail wagging like he'd found a soulmate. I joked that he never liked anyone that fast, not even me. She looked down, ruffled his fur, and said, "Dogs know energy. They don't lie." Turns out, she was an aerospace engineer turned hobbyist biker. Her Triumph was a restoration project, a gift from her late father. It needed more work than she admitted. And over the next few weeks, she kept coming back. For help, for tools, for coffee, for me. There was no grand romantic soundtrack. No fixing of each other. Just quiet compatibility, respect, eye contact that lingered. Conversations about torque ratios and grief, shared silences that weren't awkward. One night, after the shop closed, she stayed to help me finish tuning a custom build. As the engine roared to life, she looked at me across the steel frame and said, "You ever realize how machines don't lie to you? You give them what they need, and they give it back." I nodded. People should work like that.
She just smiled. Some do, eventually.
Ryan, meanwhile, did what people like him do. He tried to pivot, to rebrand. Rumors said he was pitching a new startup, something about emotional wellness for entrepreneurs. I almost laughed, but then I remembered men like Ryan don't disappear. They reinvent themselves for the next person who doesn't know better. One of my clients, a VC from Dallas, casually mentioned over lunch that he'd passed on Ryan's proposal. "Honestly," he said, "the guy talks like he's rehearsing TED Talks in the mirror, but when you ask for real data, he flinches." I just nodded and sipped my iced tea. No need to gloat. His silence said enough. A few weeks later, Sarah and I took a ride out to Pedernales Falls, just to escape the city noise. On the way back, she asked if I ever missed him, the life, the version of myself in that relationship. I thought about it. About the nights I waited for him to come home. About the spreadsheets I built for his company while mine collected dust. About how small I made myself just to keep his ego from cracking. Then I looked over at Sarah. The way she rode, steady and free. How she made space without asking me to shrink. "No," I said, "I don't miss him. I miss not knowing what betrayal feels like, but I wouldn't trade that knowledge. Not anymore." She didn't respond right away, just reached over at a red light and squeezed my hand once, firm and warm. And in that moment, I realized revenge hadn't healed me. But rebuilding gave me back my power. They say healing is nonlinear, that it comes in flashes, a laugh you didn't expect, a breath that doesn't feel tight, a ride that doesn't feel like you're running away. I used to think closure was a door someone else had to shut. But now I know it's the garage door you open yourself, with grease-stained hands and a steady heart. And if someone ever asks how I got over the man who left me for his past while planning our future, I'll say this: I didn't just get over him. I built something better from the exact place he tried to burn down. There's a strange kind of stillness that comes when the storm is truly over, not paused, not lurking behind clouds, but gone. It's the hush after the shouting has stopped, the quiet after you've run out of questions, and answers no longer matter. That's where I found myself. Months after Ryan vanished from my life like a bad investment, not broken, not burning, but still. It didn't happen all at once. Healing came in moments, not milestones, like the first time I laughed without it catching in my throat, like when a client told me, "You run the cleanest garage in Austin," and I didn't deflect or diminish it, or when I looked in the mirror and didn't see the woman who got left. I saw someone rebuilt by her own hands. Ryan never apologized. Not really. He tried. Of course he tried. They always do.
It was late November, right before Thanksgiving, when he emailed me. The subject line was Closure Classic.
Charlie, I've had a lot of time to think. I made mistakes. I let fear dictate my choices. I don't expect forgiveness, but I want you to know you mattered. You grounded me when I didn't deserve it. I hope you're okay. I stared at it for a long time. Not out of pain. Out of curiosity, like finding a letter in a bottle that washed ashore years too late. It wasn't malicious. It was cowardly. It was the kind of apology designed to soothe the sender, not the recipient. So I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Because closure, I'd learned, doesn't come from hearing I'm sorry. It comes from no longer needing it. And yet, that email sparked something unexpected, not pain, but reflection.
There are lessons fire leaves behind, not just ashes, patterns, warnings, and also resilience.
Lesson 1, being safe is not the same as being valued. Ryan didn't leave because I wasn't enough. He left because I made him feel secure, and he mistook peace for boredom. Some people aren't comfortable unless they're chasing chaos. But that's their lack, not yours. Lesson 2, never shrink to fit inside someone else's uncertainty. I spent years bending myself to match his rhythm, mistaking compromise for compatibility. But love shouldn't require you to become less. The right people make room for you to expand, not excuses for you to disappear. Lesson 3. Silence is a choice, but so is speaking. For too long, I didn't speak up. Not when he forgot anniversaries. Not when he mocked my garage as a side hustle. Not when he praised me in private, but erased me in public. The moment I started telling my truth, even to myself, was the moment I began to heal. And perhaps the most unexpected lesson of all, not every villain stays one in your story or your heart. That doesn't mean they deserve redemption, but it means you've moved beyond needing to see them punished to feel free. Freedom is choosing your peace over their chaos. One rainy December afternoon, I sat in the garage's back office, flipping through an old ledger. I found a page from 2 years ago, my rough draft for a shared business plan. It had both our names on it. Ideas, sketches, dreams. I almost ripped it out. But then I didn't. Instead, I drew a thick line through his name, and above mine. I wrote, built by Charlie West, sole owner, never borrowed. There was a knock on the door. Sarah peeked in, holding 2 mugs of cocoa. "Did I interrupt a memory?" she asked softly. I shrugged. "Just editing history." She handed me the mug, sat across from me. "You ever think," she asked, "that the people who hurt us the most were just detours, lessons disguised as love?" I thought about it. Thought about how long I held on to Ryan's potential, not his reality. How I clung to what we could have been instead of facing what we were. "I think," I said slowly, "that he was the spark that burned the version of me who would have stayed small." Sarah nodded. Then maybe the fire wasn't destruction. Maybe it was the beginning. On New Year's Eve, a full year since the proposal that led nowhere, I stood on the roof of the garage. We'd turned it into a small party space, soft lights, a grill, music playing low from an old speaker. My team was there. Monica was there, with her new girlfriend. Even Devin dropped by, carrying a bottle of cider and a quiet apology for not speaking up sooner. I told him he already had. Sarah came up behind me, slid her hand into mine. "New year," she whispered. "New rules." I smiled. No more settling, no more silence, no more scaffolding built for other people's castles. Fireworks exploded in the sky. Max barked once, then laid his head on my foot. The city lit up, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't waiting for anyone to come back. I was exactly where I belonged. So what do we take from all this?
What's the moral?
It's this. You can love deeply, give fully, trust entirely, and still be left. Not because you were too much, but because someone else was never capable of receiving it.
But that doesn't make you foolish.
It makes you alive. It means you tried. It means your heart beat louder than their fear. And while they may walk away into whatever shallow reflection of themselves they chase next you rise, you rebuild. Not to prove them wrong, but to prove to yourself that nothing, no betrayal, no abandonment, no loss can steal the fire inside you unless you let it. If you've ever been left, if someone ever told you they needed space only to fill that space with someone else, if you've ever stood in the rubble of a love you thought would last, this story is yours too. You are not a placeholder. You are not a stepping stone. You are not an option. You are the entire road. So build, reclaim, speak, and when the next storm comes, as it always does, let it find you rooted, roaring, and unshakable. Because what fire leaves behind is not just ashes. It's clarity.
It's truth.
It's a woman who knows exactly what she's worth and never forgets it again. Thank you for being here with me through this journey. If this story stirred something in you, if you've been where I've been, I'd love to hear it. Drop a comment, share your experience, or just say, I'm rising too, because someone out there needs to hear that they're not alone. And if you found strength in these words, subscribe. Share this with a friend who needs it most. I'll be back with more stories, more truth, and more reminders that survival isn't the end, it's just where the power begins. See you next time. Until then, keep your engine running